Hi! In this talk, you will learn about problems in research artifact sharing in the Kai community, why we should share more, and how to share them. My name is Chad Vacharamanotham from the University of Zurich. This work is a collaboration with Lukas Eisenring from University of Zurich, Steve Harros from Université Paris-Saclay and INRIA, and Florian Eckler from Bauhaus Universität Weimar. Many of you may be familiar with Google Scholar, a search engine for academic literature. At the bottom of this screen, you may notice a phrase, "Stand on the shoulders of giants." Have you ever wondered what this means? This phrase is attributed to a philosopher, Bernard of Chartres. It is a metaphor that humanity built their collective knowledge by building on previous discoveries. Scientific papers are, however, only a part of humanity's collective knowledge. Behind each paper is a large amount of research artifacts, study materials, code, stimuli, hardware, and software, just to name a few. I would like to invite you to think about one of your research projects. This can be an ongoing project or the one that has been already concluded. Now, think about what research artifacts that are generated during the course of that project. With this in mind, we will have a look at some statements about research artifacts. The first statement: if researchers want to use data or code from my paper, they can contact me. Would you agree with this statement? Now, imagine 10 years from now. Would your answer be the same? Let's have a look at what studies show. A team of psychology researchers requested data from the authors of 141 articles published in prestigious psychology journals in the previous year. They have only 27% of the success rate. 35% refused or unable to share the data. 14% did not reply the email altogether, and 20% did not share the data despite their promise to share them. Researchers from the field of biology requested data from 516 articles published between 2 to 20 years ago. They found that the odds of data still exist actually fall 17% per year. So as the paper gets older, it is less likely that people will be able to share data or materials. This absence of data sharing does not come out of malice. People simply move on with their lives. They graduate. They left academia. Senior researchers may not be able to retrieve the data that are collected by their undergrads. It is understandable that if the data is not available publicly, it could be lost over the time. How about the second statement? If your project happens to generate data or code, what do you think of this? Putting code or data on GitHub is a reliable way to share. Would you agree with this statement? Well, the owner of the repository on GitHub can make the repository private or delete the repository entirely. And also, GitHub itself may not be as reliable as you think. Since Microsoft's acquisition of GitHub, there are some fears that the data sharing may be less open than it should be. The truth is that we cannot guarantee that we will be in control of research artifacts that we share on GitHub always. The current CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, is a proponent of open source movement. Therefore, we see Microsoft expand into open source area. But if we look back, the previous CEO, Steve Ballmer, said that Linux is a cancer. So, do you think we should leave the future of scientific knowledge on a CEO of tech company? Once Microsoft decides to change GitHub business model, it may be too late for the scientific community to find a way out. Let's compare GitHub with some of the open scientific repositories. For example, OSF or Open Science Foundation have a clear policy that they have already secured the fund for 50 plus years of read access hosting at the current cost. In another repository, Zenodo, they clarify that the item will be retained for a lifetime of repository, and that lifetime is currently the lifetime of the host repository, which is CERN, which currently have an experimental program defined for the next 20 years at least. So if you put your data on Zenodo or on OSF, you can be sure that your data will be safe for at least 20 years to 50 years from now. Fortunately, you don't have to choose. Both OSF and Zenodo has a very good GitHub integration that allows you to create a persistent snapshot of your GitHub repository with just a few clicks. Consider this third statement. If your project collected data from study participants, what do you think of it? Data from study participants should not be shared publicly online. Well, in medicine, a systematic review of 25 qualitative studies found that in case when participants perceive that there is an actual or potential benefits from research, and if they have trust in the individuals or organization that conducting or overseeing data linkage or sharing, they are willing and generally supporting to sharing the research data. We have reflected on three of many aspects about research artifact sharings in general. But how is it practiced in HCI? Let's have a look. We asked the authors of KAI 2018 and 2019 in a survey. We asked what type of research artifacts they generate, if they share it, how they share it, and if they don't share it, why they don't share it. We have gratefully got 460 responses out of 1,356 invitations. That was 34% response rate, which is quite high. We thank all the authors who participate in this survey. In the survey, we categorize research artifacts as following. Study materials are those that are created by researchers and presented to participants to elicit their responses. For example, this could be stimuli in a controlled experiment in the lab, or it can be also technology probe or cultural probes that are presented to participants. The second category is the data. We separate them into several subcategories: raw data, processing code and procedure, and the output from data processing. For the raw data, some could be selective. That means researchers' discretion is involved at the time of data collection. Otherwise, the raw data is considered non-selective. These raw data could be processed by a qualitative or quantitative processing procedure. This procedure may be a manual procedure, for example, coding, transcription, or it could be an automatic procedure implemented in a piece of software code. The output from the data processing then can be qualitative or quantitative. The last type is the prototypes. These can be software prototypes or hardware prototypes as well. These categories are plotted on the vertical axis of this slide. On the horizontal axis is the percentage of the responses. For each of the categories, there are two rows. One row for the survey result from 2018 and another row for the result from 2019. For example, in the first row, 34% of the respondents in 2018 shared their study material, and 66% did not share their study material. Overall, from this chart, we can see that the percentage of materials that are shared in the KAI community is relatively low. We believe that actual sharing practice is likely to be lower due to several concerns that arise from the data. Let's have a look at some of them. From the respondents who indicate that the data is shared publicly, many of them have responded that they will only share research artifacts upon request. Also, many of the respondents indicate that they only share their research material on GitHub. There are several barriers that people have about sharing research data online. And these barriers are similar between the raw data and the processed data. The majority of the concerns are the sensitive data of the participants and that they haven't obtained participants' permission, or they don't see benefits of sharing. The first concern is a valid concern, although it can be mitigated in some subfields of the research or by a proper anonymization. The second and the third concerns, that they haven't obtained participants' permission or they don't see benefits of sharing, indicate that there are big opportunity for educating the understanding of data sharing in HCI. We argue that sharing is good for HCI because you allow fellow researchers to be confident of the knowledge that you contribute, and they can also use your research artifact to build upon the knowledge that you have contributed. The community as a whole can also save time from having to reinvent the wheel, for example, by recreating the study materials, re-implementing the software, or re-implementing the code for data analysis. Sharing is also good for you. Take a look at the €1 filter paper. It has gained high citations, and there are many people built upon the tools that are open sourced. And part of it is also eventually used in commercial products. You will make impact not only to the research, but to practice as well. There are a few things to think about if you decide that you will share research artifacts. First, you should plan early which artifact that you will generate and which artifacts that you want to share. You should prepare how to store these artifacts properly. You should collect only the necessary data from study participants. And when you share, weigh the trade-off between transparency, privacy for study participants, the effort to share the data, and the rawness of the data. Where you want to share also matters. Choose the fair location: findable, accessible, immutable, and reusable. If sharing is not possible, you should also describe the reasons why it is not possible. You can describe this in your paper or as a supplementary materials. These are just an overview of how to share research material. On page 8 to 10 of our paper, we provide details about these points, and we also give many pointers to the resources that will help you plan and make decisions about your research artifacts. Research material sharing is just a small addition to the research craftsmanship that we have. Practice in material sharing is a contributing factor that will push your paper from one that is just accepted to a conference or journal to the one that people build on and cite. We envision that our work will be the first step that people can build upon. By understanding the nuances, the concerns, the barrier, and devise the guidelines that encourage research material sharing that take care of these concerns in each type of context or each sub-communities. In the field of HCI, many of us build tools, especially ones that are enjoyable to use. Some of the challenges in research material sharing may be addressable by having a better tools to process and share those research materials. We strongly believe that HCI can improve not only our own field, but the scientific practice as a whole. This presentation is only a sneak peek of the paper. We have more discussion on issues such as data protection, anonymization. We have more details on our 11-point recommendation for the authors. We also provide recommendation for reviewers as well as program shares. You can find the paper and research artifacts at the link on the screen.